For many of us, meeting someone new for the first time is not always an easy thing to do. When people meet at times, they will start to discuss their lives and share their lives and their life experiences. For me, I can say to someone that in 3 minutes of just being honest, most people will assume that I'm crazy or I'm making up stories. Just in being honest and sharing things about my life, most people will think that I'm crazy or have all sorts of other judgments and opinions against me. And so I've been through that situation before of trying to decide, how honest do I be? Do I wait a while to see if it makes sense to tell this person certain things about me? Um, but depending as well on how they start telling things about themselves in first getting to meet someone, if you're holding back, people will tend to know that, well, why aren't you sharing anything? So first off, I really need to get this out and say part of me doesn't want to do this at all. And so this is actually a very difficult process for me to work on creating this video series, Show of Reality. This part of what I'm saying right now, I may or may not actually air or have in footage to use. And I'm just actually speaking to the camera to try to get used to going into the space of what I'm planning on hoping to say today, unless I just turn it all down and call it a day and not do this episode. But I'm really feeling the need that I need to do this for many reasons. And part of it is to just feel that I can freely express myself to the camera in front of me, to anyone that might end up hearing this. Of course, I can delete this, and this is probably a good process to work with, of creating this sort of dialogue of myself with myself, just to myself in this way, and possibly or not use it as footage. So I really need to allow myself to feel free to be able to share this information, to really gain my own voice for this project that I'm working on here, that I'm going to end up calling a Show of Reality. It's my reality show, but it's not staged, obviously, as you can see. I mean, I do have a setup that, so to speak, but it's not staged in the way that most reality shows are set up and made. It's not scripted, which is why I'm having difficulty finding my voice as well. So we'll see how this goes. So I'm going to take a couple breaths and see if I can get into it. But part of me is saying no. I'm literally hearing no in my head. I don't want to do this, but I do want to do this. And so that's part of the quandary that I find myself in this 2 minutes and 19 seconds of this part of this, where I've had 12 minutes already, most likely, of all the footage that I've deleted. But I've decided to try to just keep it going and see if I can end up working on this project and getting forward with it. So we'll see how this goes. For me, talking about my childhood can be a difficult thing because my childhood was very multidimensional. So within 3 minutes of just telling some true stories of my experiences in life, most people would think that I'm crazy. They wouldn't know how to handle what I would say. They wouldn't know how to process. And at times it would just literally go over their heads and they wouldn't hear a word that I said. So within 3 minutes, I can speak honest truth of experiences I've had in my life, and most people will think I'm crazy or making the stories up. I have memories of consciousness of being in the womb before I was born. The memories are traumatic, and they deal with the passing of my twin brother that was not born with me. When I was older, and I discussed this with my mother, I was able to confirm several things regarding the night of my birth, including the fact that I told my mom that I had memories of not being able to breathe well, and that I struggled in the womb with breathing and many other things. My mother, very shocked, explained to me that the night of my birth, she actually was put on oxygen, and the doctors had to tell her that the oxygen wasn't actually for her, but it was for her baby. My mother even told me how the doctor sat with her the entire night and held her hand to help comfort her. As a small child, I had night terrors of dying on a battlefield in what appeared to be another life. As an adult, I've been able to go to that battlefield and have more memories, more awareness of that battle come forward. As a toddler, I had many visions, psychically seeing into many aspects of my future life. I saw through the states of ego that I would have in those visions, in those periods of my life. There have been times in my life where, when I was experiencing those events, those times that I saw through as a child, that I actually saw what appeared to be the child spirit me watching the older part of me in that current position, experiencing and going through the ordeal. I've had experiences where I have seen not only my experience of life ahead in visions as a child, but I saw myself experiencing and dealing with world events as well, decades before those events unfolded. I discuss much of this in my book, Awaking Spirit, Reclamation of Being, but there's much that I don't actually speak of as well. This show, a show of reality, is going to be a place I'm going to attempt to speak more freely of experiences I've had in my life. This is an experience, is a project for me to actually learn to speak more clearly and honestly in life. It's not an easy thing to do. I've been running away from the concept of doing this for many years now. Several years ago, I decided I wanted to create this show of reality, and put it forth because I know that there are other people that are in hiding. There are other people that are not being their true, authentic being because of how others would react and treat them. We know how people react and treat people just for speaking about idle things. We do know how many would react and speak of others regarding things that they don't know how to deal with. When reality shows started to become popular, people that knew me would say to me that I should have my own reality show due to the fact that my experiences in life have been pretty epic and extreme, and not something that you normally would hear about back in those days. Nowadays, the last few years, more and more people are speaking about things openly that you wouldn't have normally heard about, though there's not that many reality shows that are currently actually based in reality. Most of them are scripted and are created dramas to create money, to create a storyline that glamorizes those people, that creates drama for excitement, but really are not based in reality. What is reality, we could say? Um, but they're not really based in showing episodes of reality. Um, Even the ones that are staged in ways to show how people would respond or react to different events, they're not necessarily based in reality from what I've seen in that. And so I would joke when people would tell me that I should have my own reality show, that my show would have to be a show of reality, in that nature. And thus is why this is being called a show of reality. How well I do in showing the reality will be up to debate. There's many things that I experience that you really can't show per se. We could bring cameras with me to places that I remember living in, and in different countries, and we could follow along, and we could see the reactions, the trauma, the responses that I might have in those spaces. But to me, that would be invasive and wouldn't really help me to process what I was experiencing. For me, if I were to do that sort of thing, I wouldn't have the cameras directly on me in those moments of trying to deal with any visions I might be having, anything that I'm seeing or sensing. I would probably end up having the cameras with me afterwards to discuss things that I'm experiencing, not making a spectacle of what to me are very sacred moments when I am suddenly having a vision or a memory of things that Keith doesn't necessarily possibly know in that moment how to deal with, and has to work with learning to deal with that. And yeah, that might be entertaining for some people to witness. It might even be a learning way for some people to watch that unfold. But to me, that feels like it would be an extra hardship on me and wouldn't be effective, truly, in what I was trying to put forward. So I will be going to Scotland next spring, and I will be bringing a video camera to film some of my interactions as well as some of my journey of visiting places that I see into, that it seems that I remember living in and experiencing in another life. Whether those lives that I see into are actually mine, or were lives that I've had, or lives that my soul has experienced, I can't necessarily say, because I think, quote, God is the only one that knows all of that. But I can say that I have experiences at times, I have memories at times, I have consciousness at times of lives that I see through that appear to be mine. Now, what it means in the end, as I said, only God most likely knows. And when I leave this physical body, when I leave this state of consciousness, this series collection constructs of ego states, and move to a higher space of being, I'll be able to comprehend it much more clearly, I would believe. And I say that because I have had times in this life that I've been able to move to a higher state of consciousness, and I've been able to better comprehend the other states of consciousness that I've had in various periods of this particular life. And I've also had experiences where, as I've been in those higher states of consciousness, I've realized that I wouldn't be able to maintain that state of consciousness long term, and that I would end up having to come back into my body and have and deal with and process those states of consciousness within my lower states of consciousness. To literally be bringing higher states of consciousness into the lower states of consciousness, to raise up and process, to better comprehend who I am, what I am, and the soul of what I am as well. It takes an ability of response, a responsibility to be able to vibrate a frequency that can hold a higher state of consciousness. For some of us, it's a learning experience where we have moments of higher states of consciousness, and then we come back into our quote normal waking state of consciousness, and then try to process those levels together. There are karma that is involved. There are complicities of how we're behaving and how we wish to behave, and things that we can learn within those states involved in all of that as well. So as I create this experience, this video series, I will be piecing together different portions from different days, most likely. And so the setting might change. And maybe I don't need to tell you that, but I think I'm saying it because I'm psychologically working my way through what it is I'm creating here in this video series. I've tried not to sit and graph it all out or create scripts because I want this to be a work in progress. I am a work in progress. I think we all are a work in progress, and I want this to have a learning curve to it that can maybe surprise even me as to what I can teach myself in the process. And I say that because I've had periods in times where deeper parts of me knew better than what my projected self, my current state of consciousness, knew. And if I really paid attention and learned to see past myself, I could see my being more clearly. And I could learn what my being is trying to tell me as it's holding space for me. That's much like what we can learn from our parents if they're trying to hold space for us, or what we could learn from a higher being that is there around us to protect us and to guide us with our free will. So I do believe that our souls hold space for our personalities, our states of conscious, our ego states even. For me, an ego state is a curious thing because as a child, I saw through many of my states of ego that I would have growing up. I even saw into states of ego as a child that I would have later in life that I didn't like. I saw aspects of myself, my projected self, through time and space in the future that I wasn't happy with. I as well saw that in my future I wasn't happy, and I've lived through those spaces of time and realized I wasn't happy, and I realized more of why I wasn't happy in different periods of my life. I've also realized that there were times in my childhood when I had fast glimpses into my future life that I assumed that more around that event that I saw into would be chaotic or sad, that actually weren't. That I saw into a moment in my life of pain and suffering, but that pain and suffering wasn't my entire life. Though I will say, much of my earlier aspect of life was mostly pain and suffering. So for me, looking back into parts of my childhood are very painful. But it's something that I've had to do as I grew up to learn from those moments, to as well realize how much protection was actually there for me from the higher realms of spirit. So why do I want to create this show of reality? It's really not for attention. Much of my life I've hidden from others. Much of my life I've hidden from myself even. It's been an interesting journey of trying to live, trying to be productive in life while holding back and hiding so much of who you actually are. Some of that is due to fear. As a child, I saw that as I grew up, that I would have people that would dislike and even hate me. I saw that people would say that I would go to hell. Imagine being a toddler and having visions into your future life, seeing that people would hate you and say that you should go to hell. As a toddler, as a small child, I saw that. I felt that. As a toddler, I saw into parts of my life that were very painful, that were very lonely. As a toddler, I saw that when I was 19 years old, I would end up having a vision that was so huge that after it, people around me wouldn't know how to deal with what I was experiencing, and they would put me in a mental ward. I saw as a toddler, when I was a toddler, I saw that when I was 19, I would be put in a mental hospital by a member of my family because they wouldn't know how to comprehend that a person can actually have visions. As a toddler, I saw that at 19, I would be in a mental ward for 3 months. I saw no way around or through that, but through that. When you grow up and know that if you're honest, other people will come after you, literally, that if you're honest, people will assume you're crazy because they are unable to see through their own craziness. And so they will project their issues onto you and think that those are your issues and then come after you for them. When you're a child and you see that growing up means that if you speak your truth, people will come after you, it sets up some roadblocks for how to deal with growing up. When you're a toddler and you see visions into your future life, it's not easy to be 3 years old, 5 years old, or 7 years old when you're suddenly trying to be those ages and suddenly you're seeing into what's going on in other parts of your life. Then imagine having times where you end up having memories, flashbacks, if you will, of what would appear to be seeing into previous lives. Even in the beginning, not even knowing the concept of previous lives, just knowing you're seeing into a time period that seems like it's you, but it's not you, it seems like. But all the experiences you're feeling are deep within you. Coming out authentically honest in life is not an easy thing to do for some people. Partly, it deals with how much of truth have you experienced and can speak of. For some people, they grow up with an illusion of what those around them have projected. They live a life in a bubble or in a cult of traditions that they're unable to see through, and they think that that is all there is, when in fact other people are having experiences far greater or far different than they're having. And when I say far greater, I don't necessarily mean better or worse. Think of that phrase without any judgments at all. It's much easier, but not, to actually do the videos where I'm reading a teleprompter. It's a little difficult in trying to do it naturally without seeing my eyes do the lines. And it's even easier to create videos where I just do a voiceover and you don't see my face, and I can do the voiceover when I want, and break it up and piece it together. Or even nowadays being able to do a voiceover with an AI version of my voice, and I just have to type in paragraphs of what I want it to say. Though, obviously, that's not as authentic as trying to do something like this. So this is what I'm trying to do. So this series, A Show of Reality, is going to, over time, hopefully if I continue doing it for however long I continue doing this show, will end up being a evolution of me allowing myself to be authentic and coming forward, and how that plays out. Whether it's difficult, whether it's easy, whether I do one episode and then delete it off of YouTube in total. There's always the ability that I can just take my whole YouTube channel and delete the whole thing. I hope I don't do that. I hope I don't end up in a position where I just want to run away from all of this and pretend it never happened. Can we take back the things that we've said? But in truth, a lot of what I'm trying to do here is to allow myself to be authentic and for me. So even if I recorded all of this and spliced it together and made it look good, and I don't necessarily have to put it out there. And it's easier when I realize that, because then I can just speak freely. And it's weird being empathic and doing this, because I realize obviously there's no one in front of me right now. There's a camera, there's my space that I've set up for this, and there's nobody in the house to hear me, which is awkward when I do these sort of things. And I know that there's people listening or overhearing. Nobody's snooping in, so to speak. But it's kind of awkward, because as I'm doing this, as I'm speaking, I'm hearing my voice. I'm hearing it echo back at me, and there are times I'm seeing aspects of me. I'm seeing insecurities I might have. I'm feeling insecurities I might have. I'm seeing growth. I'm seeing changes. I'm seeing different things from the past, and maybe I'm seeing things from the future at times too. It can be a little complex. When you're empathic and you are openly empathic, you're able to feel things in ways that someone that is not openly empathic is unable to feel. Finding our voices is a theme for many people right now in this stage of the evolution of humanity. In many countries, there are people that are learning to be able to come forward and be more honest and authentic in their life. And thus, they have to deal with how their friends or relatives will take that. I think there are many people that could be watching this that would realize that they themselves have had times in their life that they've had to pretend that they are someone else around their friends or family, because they know how they would react if they would honestly be who they are. And so there's a lot of changes going on in society as more people are becoming more authentically present in their own lives and not feeling that they have to hide portions of themselves from others. At the same time, there are many people realizing that we're not ourselves to begin with, as weird as that sounds. We are a being that has a self that may project a self forward into their life, but we're not the self. And those of us that are able to sense and be aware of that realize that there are many people out there in life that are lost within themselves, that are lost within their projections and can't find their way out of that. They're lost within the dramas of their projections. We can think of different, even political leaders that are so wrapped up in themselves that they're actually not even offering anything of service to others. There are many people in life that are lost in that dis-ease of being lost in the projections of themselves as well as the projections of others. I've heard many times people say, "Oh, you've hurt my feelings," when they hear somebody say something rude to them. But in truth, did that person hurt your feelings? Or are you hurting your own feelings with what they said? As an empathic therapist, I sometimes will ask people when they say to me that their feelings were hurt on something, and I try to clarify, were you hurting your feelings or did that person hurt your feelings? And it takes people at times a good amount of time to realize, a good amount of energy to realize that they're the ones hurting their feelings. Yeah, people can be rude and they can be mean and offensive, but it's up to us to decide, to have the choice. Are we going to hurt our feelings with what they're said or what they do? Yeah, if they stab us with a knife, then our feelings are going to be hurt by them, but that's something different. So within 3 minutes, I can speak honestly, openly, truthfully, and your average person would think that I'm crazy or making it up. As I've said before, I have memories of consciousness of being in the womb. I have memories of the trauma of my twin brother passing on in the womb before born, and I had to digest and process the energetic energy structure that was in the womb with me. There's much about that that I'm not prepared to talk about. There's experiences I've had in life that are epic in the nature of speaking them out loud. I met Muhammad Atta from 9/11 before 9/11. I actually met him in Florida, and he took me to lunch, and we had a very deep conversation. In meeting Muhammad Atta, I first met him on the computer in an internet chat room. I was knowing that I was going to be going to Fort Lauderdale, Florida in January of that year that I met him. And I joined one of the chat rooms in Fort Lauderdale. And in my profile in the chat room, I wrote that I had interest in reincarnation, in psychic visions, and things of that nature. And while I had that interest, I wasn't currently fully dealing with my own senses and being as honest with myself, because I was processing everything that I was hiding from for much of my life still. And so when I met him, I was starting to reopen to my senses. I was starting to reopen to being honest with myself as to who I was. I was starting to be honest more with people in processing how it felt on how they responded. And still, not that many people were all that positive in the things that I would say, because they often were too large for those people to handle, to comprehend, to process and deal with, as if they weren't hard enough for me. I realize at times when I speak like this that I sound crazy. If you were to just take the words. But I know I've experienced those things, so I'm able to see through any crazy aspect to see the truth of what I've experienced, but know as well that there's much more that I'm still processing regarding things I've experienced. So when I met Muhammad Atta, I'm not remembering his screen name very clearly, but it did have his last name in it. And I remember him telling me that it was an anagram um, to his name, and that his name was like an anagram in of itself. And so he told me that his first name was Muhammad, but not after the god, but named after his father. And he made comments about his father. And from what he said, it didn't sound like he had a good relationship with his father. And it didn't really sound like he was all that in a good space with the Muhammad would have been, you would have thought, who he looked up to religious wise. And so that's a curious nature when I think back on different things. And so when we met in person, we went for lunch and had some deep conversation. He didn't like it when I talked about past lives. And I don't recall fully the conversation, but I recall that he got kind of angry when I talked about past lives and the fact that we are born again, and that we have to deal with the karma of this life at times, and that can be why we're born again. He was kind of angry about that, to be honest. And I realized in talking with him that a friendship wouldn't actually develop from that lunch interaction. Um, he was pleasant enough, but I felt that empathically there was much that he was holding back on, and there was much that I wasn't allowing myself to truly feel and realize with him as well. Though it is telling the things that he said to me that I didn't catch on, or I didn't psychically sense more to. Whether or not I saw meeting him when I was a child, I'm not recalling. I don't recall as a child whether I saw 9/11 or anything of that nature. Um, I did see other world events as a child, um, but I'm not sure if I saw that, and if I did, how I had blocked it from my consciousness. Because, of course, being a child and having the ego states of being a child, and then having that blown open to seeing into ego states into your future, and seeing beyond your states of ego, seeing into your soul, seeing into higher dimensions, is a lot to process when you're 3, when you're 5 years old, when you're 7 and 8 years old. That's a lot to process. It's a lot to process just trying to be a little kid, never mind having all these other multidimensional aspects of who it appears you're going to be and who it appears you might have been in previous lives as well. And so that's, a lot to work with as a small child. And when I hear myself talk about these things, and I hear some of the natures of things that I say, and I know that it sounds crazy, it comes back to me, and how am I not crazy on the fact that I've dealt with all of this and learned to process a good amount of it. I mean, there's still a lot that I need to process. I think we're all a work in progress, so to speak, a work in process as well. And so when I met Muhammad, one of the things he said to me, because he did talk about the fact that he was in flight school, and he told me how one of the things that he found curious was that in the United States, because he explained that he was from a different country, and we talked a little bit about that. He explained to me that he thought it was a curious thing that terrorists could fly planes into tall buildings. And I heard that. I didn't fully hear that, obviously. And I don't recall in that space of time of me blocking a lot of things. I recall me not getting certain things. I recall me being confused by certain things. But remember, at that point in my life, I was still hiding from myself, even though I was trying to come forward and discover and admit to myself things that I've been dealing with in much of this life. I was still in the space of having issues and not really having that many people in my life that I could share deeply with what I was going through. I had people in my life that I could share with, but there were limitations on what they could process and what they could handle. It's hard at times when you open up and you bare your soul and you start to tell someone something and they shut you down and tell you, oh, that's ego. And that happens when it comes to some of the lives I see through. Oftentimes people are open to hearing about those lives. And then when they realize that I'm seeing through the life of someone famous in history, they automatically assume right away that I must be crazy. Yet those same people, before we get to that point of me admitting that, if I were to tell them that I'm seeing that I was a beggar in a former life and I was poor or whatever trauma that I was dealing with, they would have listened to that. They would have accepted that. They would have eaten that up. But when you start telling them that most of the lives that you see through are famous historical figures, it gets pretty weird. Almost always, they'll assume you're crazy. Because, quite frankly, there's a lot of people that we've heard that have said, well, maybe there's not a lot of people, but when we do hear about people talking about reincarnation in the past, we've heard mostly people that claim that they're Cleopatra or someone else famous, and they present themselves in a way that we kind of figure they're not all that mentally stable, and that it doesn't come across as truth. And so I think most people, or anyone that would have actual memories of being someone famous in another life, if reincarnation is real, or what we seem to believe it is, I think most people that would have memories of what seems to be somebody famous in another life probably wouldn't dare tell anyone, maybe close friends. And if you're lucky, you have close friends that can hear, listen, and hold space for you, then that's a good thing. But if you grow up and you don't have space held for you by people, it's a different set of circumstances. It's difficult to have visions as a child and see things and know that you have to shut yourself down because you're in danger. And as a child, I was shown danger that I would be in if I spoke freely. I was shown the danger by people that were dangerous to me, that reacted to me. As a small child, not only did I see things in those ways, I saw spirits at times, disembodied spirits. I remember being very small, 4 or 5 years old, and having a woman come up to me and seeing an entity, a demon type thing on her, and reacting to it and being deeply confused why no one else was reacting to her or that thing on her. It was almost like that thing was coming towards and at me. And I was trying to run away, and people were wondering why I was acting so weird. You know, why is the little kid so crazy? When I was trying to get away from something that seemed dangerous, something that seemed like it was threatening me, yet nobody else saw it. So I had to learn that those people around me couldn't see those things. It's a little bit of a switch of being, okay, they're seeing it, and why are they reacting, to realizing, wait, they're not seeing it or feeling it to begin with. I was empathic as a small child as well, so I could empathically feel things that were going on inside of other people. So I had to learn that I shouldn't speak about what I was feeling about people, because a lot of people don't want what they're feeling to be known, especially if it's not good stuff, especially if they're not a safe person to be around. And if a little kid outs that, it's not a good thing for the little kid. As a little kid, there were times that I saw when people were going to die. And that's a strange thing to realize as a little kid, that you can't talk about that for many reasons. People around you will freak out. They might even accuse you as somehow having special powers to create that death in that way. So I, as a little kid, had to handle seeing and knowing things and then pushing it aside at the same time, being like, I don't know if this is true. And then having to live through the reality of it when it came true. There was a little boy growing up that that I had, well, when I was a very small boy, there was another little boy in the neighborhood, and when I was a little boy, there was another little boy that was a few years younger than me, and I knew he was going to die, and it was strange because obviously I didn't feel like I could say anything, and it wouldn't be heard. I may end up doing some outtakes of some of this and using it at the end, um, just to sort of show some of what I'm processing as well, if I'm going to be authentic in working with this show of reality. I think I need to show some of that. I don't want, while I want this to be a nicely edited and produced show, so to speak, for lack of better words coming out of my head, I don't want this to be so finely polished that it takes away any of the raw components to it. In creating this show, in allowing myself to come forward on video, I hope that it can hold space for other people to know that they can come forward as well, to show that our voices matter. Everyone's voice is different. Everyone has experiences that are different. The depth of our experiences might be different. The worth of our experiences are all worthy, though. It doesn't matter if you've had a life of quiet experiences or a life of total chaos. There's worth in your life. My hope is, as I continue working in this process of my YouTube channel, Waking Spirit, as well as this show that I'm working on, a show of reality, that I am able to speak more clearly and not allow the past fears that I've held, to not allow the abuse of others to hold me back from coming forward and being authentic in my life. I'm not looking for anything from the world, so to speak, in response to this. And I mean that in the nature that I'm not looking for attention or celebration or any of that weird stuff. I'm not trying to be a celebrity within this. I'm not trying to be an influencer, so to speak, within this. Yes, if my words help people, if showing my difference, if showing my issues I've had in life are something that can help others, then that's a good thing. And it's weird to do this knowing that I'm not doing it for the intention, but how do you do this without getting attention? So my intention is not for the attention, but how do you come forward and live your life more fully when you've been hiding much of your life and not get attention? How do you not get attention when you're putting it on YouTube? So do I just keep doing this but not putting it on YouTube? I've literally thought, do I create this whole series and I hold it back and make it so that the day that I pass onwards and upwards, that it all downloads on YouTube? I could do that. And I might do that. Or I might do parts of it that show up later. But as well, I realized that I do have a right to my voice. I do have a right to be heard. And I do have a right to be seen. And how other people take all of that is their business. I don't have any control over that. But I'm not willing to be afraid anymore of being honest. Even though it's difficult on certain parts of it. Before COVID-19, I had a massive vision and felt the death and destruction of COVID. I saw an illness was coming that was going to kill lots of people, that was going to make many of us fearful and in our houses and such. I almost hit the floor when I had the vision. It was like a portal opened around me and just came at me, and all I saw and felt was death and destruction, health-wise, for many people. So for the next couple months, as I tried to explain what happened to people close to me, people were not able to hear that. They assumed it wouldn't be that bad. Even friends that had psychic abilities told me, oh no, that's not going to happen. And then when the news started talking about COVID, they said, oh, well, but it's not going to be as bad as what you saw. And I held space that it wouldn't be that bad. I didn't want it to be that bad, but it was painful for me to feel it, to know it deep inside, hold space for better, but as well see so many people around that didn't really care about how it was affecting other people. Having people say to me that I didn't know what I was talking about when I said that we might need to be careful about our health and how we're going to affect someone else. Owning a business and dealing with the ramifications of COVID-19 during the first part of it was horrendous. There were people that were so horrifyingly lacking compassion and making a game out of it. To know that you had visions of it beforehand and know that people would laugh at you if you said that. To know that you knew people that were in the hospital possibly dying from it and know a few people that died from it and still have people laugh at you and say it wasn't real. How do you be honest in a society that doesn't know how to take honesty? How do you be honest in a society that doesn't know how to process the truth when someone shares it with them? I've dealt with that for the last 60 years of my life. I turned 60 the other week, and I've told myself I'm making a change in my life. I don't necessarily know how much longer I'll live, but I know I'm not going to live in fear and feeling I need to be dishonest to my own self. I need to be openly honest in life, come what may. And I think there's more people out there that feel and see that in themselves as well. We live in a time period, at least in the United States, where there are so many people that can actively lie, outright lie, and people believe it's the truth. I think that has to change. What's going to happen to society if people are unable to tell the truth? And I mean that in the nature that many people are not able to tell the truth. Never mind tell the truth from lies. We live in a time where even speaking about politics can ruin your life because those others out there that are separating themselves from everyone else might come after you. And we're all in this together. It's not a them or us. We're all in the human race. And I think it's time more of us realize that. I think it's time more of us realized our responsibilities, learned our abilities of response in being human. I know many people that are within the psychic realm of work. I've heard many people that are very well-known psychics and astrologers and such say that we are in an epic time, a paradigm shift, where humanity is evolving consciously. people are talking about the fact that we're moving into the fifth dimension. And I'll talk about that in other episodes of this show. I believe we're coming from our souls, which are beyond the third dimension. And we're moving through the dimensions into the third dimension, creating our physicality that we're experiencing these lives with. And as we're doing that as a whole within humanity, we're also moving up higher into the higher dimensions as well. I don't personally believe that we have to die to get to heaven, because I believe that that's where we're coming from to begin with. I think that's why I've had so much of my life where I've had epic visions, is because I'm seeing from a higher dimension down through into the lower dimensions. I think that's why as well that at times when I see disembodied spirits, including entities and things that some people would call demons, that I can see them and they don't have control or effect on me, is because I'm seeing them from a higher dimension. So they would have to raise to a higher dimension to be able to truly interact with me. And to raise to a higher dimension, they wouldn't be the less than light entity that they are. And I say that because as an empathic therapist, I've had clients that have had entities and demons on them. In spirit, the higher dimensional realms of spirit, including Archangel Michael, have come forward during sessions and shown me what was going to happen before it happened, would tell me what I needed to say to the client to prepare them when they started to have a seizure. And the entity was removed from them by the help of the angel that was there to assist. I didn't do it, so to speak. I just held the space to allow more light to come forward. As I build out the various episodes in this show of reality, I will touch upon deeper aspects of some of the things that I've discussed in this episode.